The rain lashed against the windshield with brutal force, transforming the city streets into a blurred maze of neon lights and shadows. Thomas Bennett gripped his steering wheel tightly, his expensive suit doing little to ward off the bone-deep chill that had settled in his chest. His phone buzzed insistently, another crisis at the company demanding his immediate attention. For 5 years since Sarah's disappearance, work had been his only refuge, but a flash of movement caught his eye. Through the curtain of rain, he glimpsed a small figure darting between the trash cans, a boy, no more than 12, his tattered clothes hanging like rags on his thin frame. Their eyes met for a brief moment, steel blue eyes filled with an ancient wisdom that no child should possess. The screech of tires shattered the moment. Thomas's head snapped up to see a truck hydroplaning directly toward him, its headlights burning through the rain like angry eyes. Time seemed to slow. His hands froze on the wheel, his mind blank with terror. Then something hit him, not the truck, but a small, desperate force from the side. The boy had sprinted from the shadows, throwing himself against Thomas with surprising strength. They tumbled together as the truck roared past, missing them by inches. The impact with the pavement was brutal. Thomas felt the rough concrete tear at his clothes, heard the boy's sharp cry of pain. They rolled to a stop near a storm drain, the icy rain washing over them in sheets. Mister, are you okay?" The boy's voice trembled. Whether from cold or fear, Thomas couldn't tell. Blood trickled from a nasty gash on the child's arm, but his only concern seemed to be for the man he'd just saved. "You're hurt," Thomas managed, trying to sit up. Why did you do that? You could have been killed." The boy's response, barely audible above the rain, would haunt Thomas forever, because every life matters, sir. Even if nobody thinks mine does. In that moment, soaked to the bone and sitting on the cold pavement, Thomas Bennett felt something crack inside him, the wall of ice he'd built around his heart since Sarah vanished. This child, who had nothing, had risked everything to save a stranger. The wail of approaching sirens filled the air, but neither moved. They remained there, the wealthy businessman and the homeless boy, bound together by an act of pure sacrifice that would change both their lives forever. If you found this opening scene compelling and want to discover how Thomas and the brave young boy's lives intertwine, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue crafting emotional stories that touch hearts and celebrate the power of human kindness and sacrifice. Thomas Bennett wasn't always the cold, distant figure who haunted the corridors of Bennett Enterprises. Before Sarah's disappearance, he had been known for his warm smile and generous spirit. The transformation began 5 years ago, on the rainy October night when his wife vanished without a trace. At 45, Thomas was the epitome of success by society's standards. His company, which started as a small investment firm, had grown into a financial empire spanning the East Coast. The Bennett name adorned sleek skyscrapers, his face graced business magazines, and his wealth could buy anything except answers about Sarah's fate. The change in him was gradual but profound. The corners of his mouth, once quick to turn upward, now seemed permanently etched in a downward curve. His dark hair had begun graying at the temples, not from age but from the weight of sleepless nights spent searching for clues. His brown eyes, which Sarah used to say sparkled like autumn sunlight through whiskey, had become dull and distant. Every morning Thomas would stand before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city wake up below. His reflection showed a man impeccably dressed in tailored suits that cost more than most people's monthly salary, but his eyes told a different story, one of loss, loneliness, and a gnawing emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. The investigation into Sarah's disappearance had gone cold years ago. The police had found nothing, no ransom demands, no signs of foul play, no body. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The only clue was her car, found abandoned near the city's industrial district, with no signs of struggle. The last security camera footage showed her driving away from her doctor's appointment, looking troubled but otherwise normal. Thomas had hired private investigators, offered rewards, and spent countless hours retracing her steps. Each dead end, each false lead, had chipped away at his humanity until he retreated into himself, building walls so high that even his closest friends couldn't reach him anymore. His response to the pain was to work obsessively. He arrived at the office before dawn and left long after sunset, drowning himself in spreadsheets and acquisitions. His employees whispered about him the man who turned to ice, the billionaire who forgot how to smile. They didn't understand that every moment of stillness was torture, filled with memories of Sarah's laugh, her touch, the way she would surprise him with coffee on long workdays. The grand Bennett mansion, once filled with warmth and the promise of family, had become a mausoleum of memories. Sarah's belongings remained exactly as she'd left them, her favorite books still bookmarked on the nightstand, her gardening gloves still hanging by the back door. Thomas couldn't bring himself to move them, as if maintaining this shrine might somehow bring her back. The only time he showed any emotion was during his monthly visits to the detective assigned to Sarah's case. These meetings had become shorter and more perfunctory over the years, but Thomas refused to stop them. It was his way of telling the world and himself that he hadn't given up hope. Yet beneath the frozen exterior, something of the old Thomas remained. It surfaced in small ways: the anonymous donations to women's shelters, the college scholarships quietly offered to employees' children, the way his hand would sometimes drift to the wedding ring he still wore. These moments were rare glimpses of the man he used to be, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. But it would take something extraordinary to thaw the ice around Thomas Bennett's heart, something like a brave young boy who would risk everything to save a stranger's life, reminding him that in a world of spreadsheets and profit margins, the most valuable things couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Michael Anderson had learned early that the streets of Boston showed no mercy to 12-year-old boys, no matter how innocent their hearts. His home was wherever he could find shelter: abandoned buildings, bridge underpasses, the occasional church doorway when the priests turned a blind eye. Yet despite the harshness of his circumstances, Michael possessed a spirit that refused to be broken. His eyes, a striking shade of blue that seemed too old for his young face, held a peculiar mix of wisdom and hope. The same hands that deftly picked through dumpsters for food would gently help younger street kids find safe sleeping spots or share his meager findings with elderly homeless people. Even in his darkest moments, Michael maintained an unwavering belief in human kindness. The story of how he ended up on the streets was tragically common yet uniquely heartbreaking. His mother, a single parent struggling with addiction, had disappeared 3 years ago, leaving him in the care of a state system that failed him repeatedly. Foster homes turned out to be places of neglect or abuse, and group homes felt like prisons. After his 5th placement ended in violence, Michael chose the streets over another roll of the system's cruel dice. He had developed an impressive set of survival skills. Michael knew which restaurants would leave edible leftovers, which security guards could be trusted, and which areas to avoid after dark. He'd mastered the art of becoming invisible when necessary and appearing presentable enough to avoid suspicion when he needed to blend in with the regular world. Education remained important to him, even without a school to attend. He would spend hours in the public library, reading everything from medical textbooks to adventure novels. The librarians, touched by his earnest desire to learn, often slipped him sandwiches and turned a blind eye to his unwashed appearance. Michael dreamed of becoming a doctor someday, of helping others who had no one else to turn to. His most prized possession was a worn notebook, protected in a plastic bag, where he kept careful records of the people he encountered, names, conditions, and needs. It was his way of maintaining humanity in a world that treated him as invisible. He had even developed a basic understanding of first aid, becoming an unofficial medic for other street kids. Despite the hardships, Michael never turned to crime or violence. He would rather go hungry than steal, would rather sleep in the cold than join the gangs that occasionally tried to recruit him. This moral compass, unusual for someone who had every reason to be bitter, earned him a reputation among both the homeless community and the social workers who occasionally crossed his path. There was something else that set Michael apart: his ability to read people. He could spot genuine kindness beneath stern exteriors and detect danger behind friendly smiles. This gift had kept him alive more than once, helping him avoid those who would do him harm while finding unlikely allies in his daily struggle for survival. But beneath his mature exterior lay the heart of a child who still yearned for the simplest things: a warm bed, a safe place to call home, someone to say goodnight to. At night, curled up in whatever shelter he'd found, Michael would sometimes allow himself to imagine what it would be like to have a family again. These dreams were his most closely guarded secret, more precious than any material possession. His encounters with other street kids had taught him that hope was dangerous. It could break you faster than any physical hardship. Yet Michael couldn't help but hope. He believed that someday something would change. That belief sustained him through cold nights and empty stomachs, through loneliness and fear. It was this same hope that would lead him to risk his life for a stranger on a rainy night, setting in motion events that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone he would touch. Sarah Bennett's disappearance had left more questions than answers. At 38, she had been a force of nature, a successful pediatrician, with a heart that seemed too big for one person. Her shoulder-length auburn hair and warm green eyes were fixtures at local charity events, where she championed causes for underprivileged children. The last photo taken of her showed a woman with a secret in her smile, as if she knew something wonderful that she couldn't yet share. James and Victoria Crawford embodied everything wrong with wealth without conscience. Their perfectly manicured existence in Boston's elite social circles masked darker intentions. James, with his silver-streaked hair and practiced charm, headed the Crawford Foundation, supposedly dedicated to child welfare. Victoria, perpetually adorned in designer suits and artificial smiles, served on countless charity boards. Their reputation for helping troubled children masked a history of suspicious adoptions and disappeared funds. Judge Richard Parker presided over family court with a reputation for being tough but fair. His 60 years had given him eyes that could see through deception and a heart that genuinely cared about the children whose fates he decided. His silver hair and weathered face spoke of decades spent weighing difficult decisions, and his small office was filled with letters from families he had helped unite. Detective Laura Martinez refused to let Sarah's case grow cold, even when department politics pushed for closure. Her dedication stemmed from something she'd noticed in the initial investigation: inconsistencies in the Crawfords' statements about their last meeting with Sarah. At 42, with 15 years on the force, Laura's instincts told her there was more to the story than a simple disappearance. Dr. Emily Watson ran the free clinic where Sarah had volunteered. Now in her 50s, she kept a secret that weighed heavily on her conscience: Sarah's last visit to the clinic, just days before she vanished. The test results she'd handed her friend that day might hold the key to understanding why Sarah disappeared. Father Michael O'Connor of St. Patrick's Church had been offering shelter to homeless children for 20 years. His silver hair and kind blue eyes made him a trusted figure among street kids. He knew Michael's story better than most and had tried multiple times to get him into proper care, only to be stonewalled by bureaucracy and the Crawfords' influence over local child services. The story also touched Maria Gonzalez, a nurse at Boston General who would become crucial in connecting the dots. She had been on duty the night Sarah disappeared and remembered something odd: a heated argument between Sarah and Victoria Crawford in the hospital parking lot. Robert Sullivan, Thomas's childhood friend and now his company's legal counsel, carried his own burden of guilt. He had seen the signs of Sarah's distress in the weeks before she vanished, but had dismissed them as stress from her work. His loyalty to Thomas would be tested as secrets began to surface. These characters orbited around the central story of Thomas, Michael, and Sarah, each holding pieces of a puzzle they didn't yet understand they were part of. Their lives would interweave in ways none of them could predict, drawn together by fate, choice, and the unshakable bonds of human connection. The stage was set for a story that would challenge their assumptions, test their loyalties, and ultimately reveal that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to stand beside you when the world turns dark. Each of them would play a crucial role in the events about to unfold, their actions rippling out to affect not just Thomas and Michael's lives, but the very fabric of their community's understanding of justice, compassion, and what it truly means to be family. The morning sun barely penetrated the maze of downtown Boston's alleyways as Michael emerged from his makeshift shelter behind a dumpster in the financial district. His few possessions were carefully packed in a worn backpack, a change of clothes from the church donation bin, his precious notebook wrapped in plastic, and a half-empty water bottle. The early hours were crucial for survival. This was when bakeries discarded yesterday's unsold goods, when restaurant workers might be persuaded to share leftover food before the morning rush began. Michael had mapped out every potential food source within walking distance, timing his rounds with precision born of necessity. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," he called softly to the elderly woman who ran the corner store. She pretended not to see him picking through her dumpster each morning, sometimes deliberately leaving edible items in clean bags. Today he found a slightly bruised apple and a package of day-old sandwiches, a feast by his standards. The city was waking up around him, suits and briefcases hurrying past without a glance in his direction. Michael had mastered the art of invisibility, knowing exactly how to stand so people's eyes would slide right past him. It was a survival skill as important as finding food or safe shelter. His morning routine included checking on other street kids in his unofficial network. Behind the public library, he found Tommy, a 9-year-old who had fled an abusive foster home last week. Michael shared half his sandwich, knowing the younger boy needed it more than he did. "You got to be careful," Tommy Michael advised, watching the younger boy devour the food. "The shelter on 4th Street is safer than sleeping here. The librarians will call social services if they spot you too often." His voice carried the weight of experience, of lessons learned the hard way. By mid-morning, Michael had made his way to his favorite spot, a small alcove near the entrance of Bennett Enterprises. He'd chosen this location carefully. The security guards were less aggressive here, and the well-dressed people entering and exiting the building sometimes dropped change without noticing. More importantly, the building's heating vents provided warmth on cold days. From his vantage point, Michael often watched Thomas Bennett arrive in his expensive car, always alone, always looking troubled, despite his wealth. Something about the man's sadness resonated with Michael. He'd seen the same look in his own reflection, the look of someone who had lost something irreplaceable. "He needs someone," Michael murmured to himself, making a note in his worn notebook. He kept careful observations of the people around him, especially those who seemed as lost as he was. It was his way of staying connected to the world that tried so hard to ignore his existence. The day progressed with its usual challenges. Michael dodged the new security guard who had been trying to clear homeless people from the area. He helped an elderly homeless veteran find his way to the free clinic, knowing doctor. Watson would treat the man kindly. He searched for bottles and cans to recycle, earning enough for a small hot chocolate which he shared with Tommy when their paths crossed again. But today was harder than most. The temperature was dropping, and his thin jacket provided little protection against the growing chill. His stomach growled constantly, the morning sandwich long since digested. Worse, he'd seen a police car circling the area more frequently than usual, likely responding to complaints about homeless people in the financial district. As evening approached, Michael found himself counting the hours until the library closed, knowing he'd have to find a new sleeping spot for the night. His usual place behind the dumpster had been fenced off for construction. The shelters were full, and he didn't trust them anyway. Too many stories of abuse and missing kids. Rain clouds gathered overhead, promising a difficult night ahead. Michael pulled his jacket tighter, watching the last office workers hurrying home to warm houses and waiting families. He allowed himself a moment of longing. Quickly suppressed dreams of comfort were dangerous on the streets. They could break your spirit faster than any physical hardship. Yet something kept him going, a stubborn belief that things could change, that kindness still existed in the world. He'd seen it in small ways: Mrs. Chen's deliberate oversight, of edible food, the librarian who pretended not to see him reading medical textbooks all day, Father O'Connor, who never pressured him to stay at the church, but always left the door open. As the first raindrops began to fall, Michael didn't know that his life was about to change dramatically. He couldn't have guessed that his next act of kindness would shatter the invisible walls between his world and Thomas Bennett's, setting in motion events that would transform both their lives forever. Rain pounded the city streets with growing intensity as evening descended on Boston's financial district. The usual crowd of businesspeople had thinned to a few stragglers hurrying home, their umbrellas bobbing like black mushrooms in the growing gloom. Michael huddled in his regular spot near Bennett Enterprises, watching water cascade down the building's glass facade. Thomas Bennett emerged from the building's revolving doors, his phone pressed to his ear, engagement in what appeared to be a heated discussion about stock prices. His normally impeccable appearance showed signs of strain, his tie slightly loosened, his shoulders tense beneath his expensive suit. "The market doesn't wait for sentiment," Richardson Thomas snapped into his phone, striding toward the crosswalk without looking. "Sell those shares before we lose everything." His focus was entirely on the conversation, oblivious to the changing traffic signals and the approaching danger. Michael saw at first the delivery truck hydroplaning around the corner, its wheels losing traction on the rain-slicked street. The driver was fighting for control, but the heavy vehicle was sliding sideways, bearing down on the crosswalk where Thomas stood, still absorbed in his phone call. Time seemed to slow down. Michael's survival instincts screamed at him to stay put, to remain invisible as he'd learned to be. Who would blame a street kid for not risking his life for a wealthy stranger? But something deeper than instinct moved him, the same force that made him share his food with Tommy, that made him help lost souls find the free clinic. "Mr. Bennett!" Michael's shout was lost in a crack of thunder. Without hesitation, he launched himself from his hiding spot, his worn sneakers slipping on the wet pavement as he sprinted toward the businessman. Thomas looked up at the last possible moment, his face registering first annoyance at the interruption, then horror as he saw the truck bearing down on him. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the pavement as he stood frozen in the headlight's glare. Michael hit him with all the force his small body could muster, shoving Thomas clear of the truck's path. The impact sent them both rolling across the wet pavement, the truck's wheels missing them by inches as it skidded past. The sound of screeching brakes and horns filled the air, mixing with the steady drumming of rain. Pain exploded in Michael's arm as they came to a stop near a storm drain. He could feel blood mixing with rainwater, trickling down his sleeve, but his only concern was for the man he'd saved. "Mr. Bennett? Are you okay, sir?" Thomas lay on his back, gasping for breath, his expensive suit soaked and torn. He stared at Michael with a mixture of shock and disbelief. You saved my life," he managed, his voice barely audible above the rain. "Why would you do that?" Michael shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the growing crowd of onlookers. "Because it was the right thing to do, sir," he replied simply, trying to hide his injured arm. Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't true. Dozens of people had been on the street, yet only this homeless boy had acted. Thomas struggled to sit up, his eyes fixed on Michael's bleeding arm. "You're hurt. We need to get you to a hospital." "No hospitals," Michael said quickly, already backing away. Hospitals meant questions, meant social services, meant being thrown back into the system he'd fled. I'm fine, really. I'm glad you're okay, Mr. Bennett. Wait, Thomas called out, but Michael had already melted into the gathering crowd, disappearing as completely as if he'd never existed. Thomas was left sitting on the wet pavement, surrounded by concerned onlookers and approaching first responders, his mind reeling from what had just happened. For the first time in 5 years, Thomas felt something crack in his carefully constructed wall of isolation. A homeless child had risked everything to save him, expecting nothing in return. The simple nobility of the act struck him deeply, awakening emotions he'd thought long buried with Sarah's disappearance. As paramedics helped him to his feet, Thomas couldn't shake the image of those striking blue eyes, so young yet so old, or the matter-of-fact way the boy had dismissed his own injury. Something about the child nagged at his memory, stirred feelings he'd tried to forget. Find him, he instructed his security team as they arrived on the scene. That boy needs help, and I owe him my life. The rain continued to fall, washing away traces of blood from the pavement, but Thomas Bennett's world had already begun to shift on its axis, though he didn't yet know how completely this encounter would change his life. 2 days after the accident, Thomas found Michael exactly where his security team said he would be, huddled in his usual spot near the building's heating vent. The boy looked smaller in daylight, his clothes still damp from the previous night's rain, his injured arm held carefully against his chest. "You're a hard person to find," Thomas said, approaching slowly to avoid startling him. "Though apparently you've been here all along." He held out a paper cup of hot chocolate, a peace offering of sorts. Michael tensed, ready to run, but the pain in his arm and the promise of warmth kept him in place. "I didn't expect you to look for me, Mr. Bennett," he said, cautiously accepting the cup. "Especially after you found out what I am." "And what exactly do you think you are?" Thomas asked, settling himself on the concrete beside Michael, his $1,000 suit gathering dust. "You're a street kid." "Nobody." Michael sipped the hot chocolate, savoring its warmth. "That's what everyone sees." "I see the person who saved my life," Thomas corrected firmly, "someone who risked everything for a stranger. That makes you very much somebody." He paused, studying the boy's profile. "Will you let me help you? There are excellent foster homes." No. Michael's response was immediate, fear flashing in his eyes. "I've been in the system. I won't go back." His hands tightened around the cup, knuckles white with tension. Thomas recognized the look. He'd seen it in his own mirror after Sarah disappeared, the look of someone who'd lost too much to risk losing anything else. "Then what do you want, Michael? Name it. Money? A place to stay? Education?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, watching people hurry past, living their normal lives. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Could you pretend to be my dad just for one day?" The request caught Thomas off guard. Of all the things the boy could have asked for, money, shelter, anything his wealth could provide, this simple wish struck him to his core. "Your father," Thomas repeated softly. Michael rushed to explain, words tumbling out. "I know it's stupid. I see fathers with their kids sometimes. Going to baseball games, eating ice cream, normal stuff. I've always wondered what that feels like. Just for one day to pretend I'm not invisible, that I belong somewhere." Thomas felt something shift inside him, a door opening in his heart that he'd thought permanently sealed. "Why me?" "Because you look as lost as I feel sometimes," Michael answered with startling honesty. "I've watched you, Mr. Bennett. You're successful and rich, but your eyes are sad, like you're missing something important. Maybe we could both pretend, just for a day." The wisdom in those young eyes struck Thomas speechless. This child who had nothing had seen through his carefully constructed facade to the emptiness beneath, had recognized in him the same loneliness that plagued his own young life. One day Thomas found himself saying, "One day to be father and son." He stood, brushing off his suit, and held out his hand. "Well then, son, shall we start now?" Michael stared at the offered hand as if it might disappear. "Really? Just like that?" "Just like that," Thomas confirmed. Though first we're getting that arm looked at. No arguments, that's what fathers do. A smile broke across Michael's face, transforming him from a wary street survivor into the child he should have been all along. He took Thomas's hand, allowing himself to be pulled to his feet. "Does this mean I can call you Dad?" Michael asked hesitantly, testing the boundaries of their agreement. Thomas felt an unexpected warmth in his chest at the word. "For today, yes, though I warn you I'm new at this father thing." "That's okay," Michael replied, falling into step beside him. "I'm new at being someone's son. We can figure it out together." As they walked toward Thomas's waiting car, neither could have known how this simple agreement one day of pretend family would change both their lives forever. They couldn't have guessed that this moment would set in motion events that would unravel long-held secrets, challenge powerful enemies, and ultimately reveal that sometimes the families we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. For now, they were simply a man and a boy, stepping into roles they'd both dreamed of but never dared hope for, their shadows merging in the morning sun as they walked away from the life of the streets towards something new and unexplored. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Thomas's Bentley pulled up to Michael's usual spot. He found the boy already waiting, wearing the same worn clothes but with a freshly washed face and combed hair, clear signs he'd made an effort to look presentable for their day together. "Good morning," Dad, Michael said hesitantly, testing the word. His injured arm was now properly bandaged, thanks to their hospital visit the previous day. Thomas had managed to avoid involving social services by calling in a favor from Dr. Watson at the free clinic. "Good morning, son," Thomas replied, surprised by how natural the word felt. Ready for your first day as a Bennett, he opened the passenger door, noting how Michael paused before getting in, as if still expecting this to be some elaborate trick. The drive to Adventure World was filled with Michael's barely contained excitement. His eyes grew wide as they approached the massive amusement park gates, the morning sun glinting off roller coaster tracks that seemed to touch the clouds. "I've never been to a place like this," Michael admitted, pressing his face against the window. "I used to watch other families go in sometimes. I'd imagine what it was like inside." Thomas felt a pang in his heart. "Well, today we're doing everything. Every ride, every game, every ridiculous carnival food you can think of. That's what fathers and sons do, right?" Their first stop was the park's newest roller coaster, the Thunderbolt. Michael stood at the entrance, trying to mask his nervousness with bravado. "It's really high," he observed, watching the cars hurtle through loops and corkscrews. "We can start with something smaller," Thomas offered, but Michael shook his head. "No, I want to try it. Will you? Will you hold my hand?" Just until we start, the question was barely audible, as if Michael feared asking for this small comfort might break their pretend relationship. Thomas found himself reaching for the boy's hand without hesitation. "That's what dads are for," he said simply. They waited in line together, Michael's small hand gripping his tightly as they watched the ride's terrifying twists and turns. As they strapped in, Thomas noticed Michael's knuckles were white on the safety bar. "Remember," he said softly, "I've got you. Nothing bad will happen while I'm here." The ride was a blur of speed and excitement. Michael's initial scream of terror transformed into whoops of joy as they spun and dove through the air. When they stumbled off, both dizzy and laughing, something had shifted between them. The pretense of their relationship had begun to feel remarkably real. They spent the morning trying every ride they could find. Thomas found himself remembering how to play, how to laugh without reservation. Michael's enthusiasm was infectious, his joy at each new experience pure and unfiltered. They shared cotton candy and hot dogs, played rigged carnival games, Thomas quietly slipping the operator extra money to ensure Michael won a stuffed bear, and took silly photos in the booth near the carousel. By early afternoon, they paused for ice cream, sitting on a bench overlooking the park's central lake. Michael had chocolate smeared on his chin, and Thomas found himself automatically reaching out with a napkin to wipe it away, a gesture so paternal it surprised them both. "Is this what it's really like?" Michael asked suddenly, his voice thoughtful. "Having a dad?" Thomas considered the question carefully. "I suppose it's different for everyone. My own father was stricter. We never did things like this." He paused, realizing something. "I think I'm learning as much about being a father today as you are about being a son." Michael nodded, finishing his ice cream cone. "You're good at it," he said simply. "Better than you think then." After a moment, I wish this wasn't pretend." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Thomas found himself wishing the same thing, surprised by how quickly this street-smart, kind-hearted boy had worked his way past his defenses. Before he could respond, Michael jumped up, pointing excitedly at the park's Ferris wheel. "Can we go on that next?" "Please, Dad." Thomas stood, pushing aside the complexity of his emotions. "Race you there," he challenged, and they took off through the crowd, their laughter joining the carnival music and excited screams that filled the air. Neither noticed the man watching them from behind a newspaper, speaking quietly into a phone. "Mr. Crawford?" "Yes, I found him. The Bennett man has him." "No, sir. It doesn't look like a simple rescue anymore. There, bonding." "Should I continue surveillance?" The observer's eyes narrowed as he watched Thomas lift Michael onto his shoulders for a better view of the park. "Yes, sir. I understand. This could complicate everything." The accident happened so quickly that neither saw it coming. They were leaving the Ferris wheel, Michael walking backwards as he excitedly described the view from the top, when his foot caught on an uneven patch of pavement. Thomas lunged forward, but he wasn't fast enough to prevent Michael from falling awkwardly, his already injured arm taking the brunt of the impact. The cry of pain that escaped Michael's lips sent ice through Thomas's veins. It wasn't just the sound of physical hurt, it was the fear that accompanied it, the kind of fear that comes from knowing that injury could mean death on the streets. Michael Thomas was on his knees beside the boy instantly, all pretense of their temporary relationship forgotten. "Let me see." "It's okay, son. Let me see." Michael tried to pull away, his survival instincts kicking in. "I'm fine, Mr. Bennett. Really. I should go." "Stop," Thomas commanded, his voice firm but gentle. "You're not running away, and you're not fine. We're getting this checked out properly." He carefully helped Michael to his feet, noticing how the boy swayed slightly, his face pale with pain. The park's first aid station confirmed what Thomas feared: the injury required hospital attention. Michael's previous wound had been aggravated, and there was swelling that worried the medic. Throughout the examination, Michael remained tense, his eyes darting between Thomas and the door. "No hospitals," Michael pleaded as they walked to the car. "They'll call social services. I'll lose everything: my freedom, my spots, my network. The other kids need me." Thomas helped him into the passenger seat, then knelt beside the open door. "Listen to me, Michael. I promise you, I swear to you, that I won't let anyone take you away. But you need medical care. Trust me, just for a little longer." Something in Thomas's eyes must have convinced him, because Michael nodded slightly. The drive to Boston General was tense, Michael clutching his arm and staring out the window, as if memorizing escape routes. In the emergency room, Thomas's wealth and influence smoothed their path, but it couldn't prevent the necessary questions. As they waited for X-rays, a nurse asked Michael to empty his pockets for the hospital gown. Among his meager possessions was something that made Thomas's heart stop: a silver locket, tarnished but familiar. "Where did you get that?" Thomas asked, his voice barely a whisper. Michael looked down at the locket, then back at Thomas. "A lady gave it to me, a few months ago when I was really hungry. She shared her food with me, let me sleep in her shelter for the night. She said it would protect me." With trembling fingers, Thomas reached for the locket. He knew what he would find inside before he opened it: the photograph he had taken himself 5 years ago, Sarah smiling at the camera, her eyes full of love and secrets. This woman, Thomas said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Did she tell you her name? Michael shook his head. She seemed scared, like she was running from something. But she was kind. She said he hesitated, thinking back. She said one day everything would be okay, that she'd find her way back home. The room seemed to spin around Thomas. Sarah was alive. She had been on the streets, helping a homeless child even while hiding from. From what? From what? From whom? The questions multiplied in his mind, but before he could ask more, the doctor arrived with Michael's x-rays. Mr. Bennett, the doctor said, glancing between Thomas and Michael, "Could I speak with you privately about these results?" Thomas looked at Michael, who gripped the hospital bed sheets tightly, fear evident in his eyes. "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of my son," Thomas replied firmly, surprising both himself and Michael with the conviction in his voice. The doctor nodded, putting the x-rays up on the light board. "The arm shows signs of previous breaks that never healed properly. There's evidence of other old injuries as well. Mr. Bennett, given these findings and the patient's situation, I'm obligated to contact Child Services." Michael began to shake, panic evident in every line of his body. But before he could bolt, Thomas placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "That won't be necessary," Thomas said, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "I'm taking full responsibility for Michael's care. My lawyers will be providing all necessary documentation." He squeezed Michael's shoulder gently. "No one is separating us. Not now." The determination in Thomas's voice wasn't just about protecting Michael anymore. Sarah's locket had changed everything. Somehow this boy was the key to finding his missing wife, and Thomas Bennett was not about to let him slip away. In the quiet of the hospital room that evening, Michael slept fitfully, his arm now properly cast and pain medication flowing through his IV. Thomas sat beside him, the silver locket open in his hands, his mind racing with possibilities. "Mr. Bennett," Michael's voice was groggy as he stirred. "You're still here?" "Of course I am." Thomas moved closer, tucking the blanket around Michael's shoulders. "I told you, I'm not leaving." Michael's eyes focused on the locket. "I should have told you about her sooner, the lady. She reminded me of someone kind, someone lost like me." Thomas took a deep breath. "Michael, I need you to tell me everything you remember about her, every detail, no matter how small. She's my wife, Sarah. She disappeared 5 years ago." Michael's eyes widened with recognition. "That's why you look so sad sometimes. You lost her, like I lost my mom." He shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. "She found me behind the grocery store on Mason Street. It was really cold that night." Thomas leaned forward, hanging on every word. "What happened?" "She shared her sandwich with me. Said she couldn't bear to see a child go hungry." Michael's voice grew soft with memory. "Her clothes were old, but you could tell she used to wear nice things. She kept looking over her shoulder like she was scared of something." "Was she hurt? Did she say why she was on the streets?" Michael shook his head. "She didn't talk much about herself, but he hesitated. She cried one night. She thought I was asleep, but I heard her say something about protecting someone, about how they would never find out." Thomas felt his heart race. "Find out what?" "I don't know, but she kept touching her stomach," like Michael's eyes suddenly lit with understanding. "Like my mom did when she was going to have a baby." The revelation hit Thomas like a physical blow. Sarah had been pregnant. His missing wife had been carrying their child while living on the streets. But why? What could have driven her to such desperate measures? "There's more," Michael said hesitantly. "The night she gave me the locket, she said something strange. She said, if you ever meet a man named Thomas Bennett, show him this. He'll understand." Thomas stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "She knew we'd meet. Somehow she knew you'd find me." "Is that why you want to help me?" Michael's voice was small, uncertain. "Just because I knew her?" Thomas turned back to the bed, seeing the fear of rejection in Michael's eyes. "No," he said firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I want to help you because of who you are. Finding out about Sarah. That's important, yes, but it doesn't change what's happened between us today." Michael studied Thomas's face, looking for any sign of deception. "Promise." "Promise." Thomas squeezed his good hand. "But Michael, I need your help. We need to find her. She's out there somewhere, probably still in danger with our baby." A noise at the door made them both look up. A nurse stood there, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in a business suit. "Mr. Bennett," the woman said, "I'm Claire Matthews from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss Michael's situation." Michael's hand tightened on Thomas's in panic, but Thomas stood calmly, positioning himself between the bed and the door. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying the weight of certainty, "you need to discuss it with my lawyers. I'm filing for emergency temporary guardianship of Michael. He's not going anywhere." The social worker frowned. "Mr. Bennett, there are procedures." "And we'll follow them all," Thomas interrupted. "But Michael stays with me. He's not just a homeless child anymore. He's our only link to my missing wife, which makes this a police matter as well as a custody issue." Claire Matthews looked between Thomas and Michael, noting their clasped hands, the protective stance Thomas had taken. "This is highly irregular," she began, but Thomas cut her off again. "So is a missing woman living on the streets while pregnant. So is a conspiracy that forced her into hiding. Something bigger is happening here, Ms. Matthews, and separating us now could put both Sarah and Michael in danger." The social worker hesitated, then nodded slowly. 24 hours, Mr. Bennett. You have 24 hours to get your lawyers involved and file the proper paperwork. After that, Thomas said firmly, Michael will be legally under my protection, and we'll find out exactly what happened to my wife. As the social worker left, Michael tugged at Thomas's sleeve. "You meant it? About keeping me?" Thomas looked down at the boy who had saved his life, who had unknowingly carried the key to finding Sarah all this time, and felt the last of his emotional walls crumble. "Yes, Michael, I meant every word." The next 24 hours unfolded in a blur of legal activity within Thomas's penthouse office at Bennett Enterprises. Robert Sullivan, Thomas's childhood friend and head legal counsel, worked tirelessly through the night, surrounded by stacks of documents and empty coffee cups. "Thomas, what you're asking isn't simple," Robert said, rubbing his tired eyes. "Emergency guardianship requires extraordinary circumstances, even with your resources." "We have extraordinary circumstances," Thomas interrupted, pacing the room while Michael slept on the office couch, his injured arm cradled against his chest. "He's connected to Sarah's disappearance. That has to count for something." "It might," Robert admitted, "but the Crawfords have already filed their own petition for custody." Thomas stopped pacing. "The Crawfords? James and Victoria Crawford? What possible interest could they have in Michael?" "They're claiming prior knowledge of his case through their foundation. They're painting themselves as concerned philanthropists worried about a vulnerable child being used to further your obsession with finding Sarah." The mention of the Crawfords triggered a memory in Thomas's mind, Sarah's unusual tension after meetings with Victoria Crawford in the weeks before her disappearance. He'd dismissed it then, but now. Detective Laura Martinez arrived shortly after dawn, her presence adding another layer to the complex situation. "The locket gives us probable cause to reopen Sarah's case," she explained, examining the silver pendant. "And Michael's testimony about her condition could change everything." "She was pregnant," Thomas said softly, the words still difficult to say. "My wife was pregnant and living on the streets. Why didn't she come to me?" Laura shared a significant look with Robert. "We've been doing some digging into the Crawford Foundation. There are irregularities, missing funds, children placed in homes without proper documentation, reports of intimidation." Michael stirred on the couch, blinking awake. His eyes immediately sought Thomas, relaxing only when he confirmed his presence. "What's happening?" he asked, voice thick with sleep. Thomas sat beside him, automatically adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. "We're fighting for you, son, but it's complicated." "Because of Mrs. Crawford?" Michael asked, surprising them all. "She's the one the pretty lady was afraid of. I remember now, I saw them arguing once, near the shelter. Mrs. Crawford was saying something about keeping quiet and doing what's best for everyone." Laura's notepad came out instantly. "When was this, Michael? Can you remember exactly what you heard?" But before Michael could answer, the office door burst open. Victoria Crawford swept in, elegant in designer clothes, her husband James following close behind. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Harrison Wells, completed the invasion. "This is completely inappropriate," Wells announced, questioning a minor without proper representation or child services present. "My son Thomas cut in, his hand protective on Michael's shoulder, is not being questioned. He's helping find his mother." Victoria's perfectly composed face showed a flicker of something. "Fear, anger," his mother, she said smoothly. "Thomas, dear, you can't seriously believe this street urchin has any connection to Sarah. You're letting your guilt over her disappearance cloud your judgment." Michael pressed closer to Thomas, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "I remember you. You were yelling at the pretty lady at Mrs. Bennet. You said if she didn't disappear, you'd make sure it never saw the light of day." The room went deadly quiet. Victoria's polished veneer cracked slightly. James Crawford stepped forward, his charm firmly in place. The boy is clearly confused, traumatized by life on the streets. He needs professional help, structured care. "He needs his family," Thomas growled. "Both the one he lost and the one he's found." Robert cleared his throat. "If you're here to contest the emergency guardianship petition, you should know we're filing additional motions. Given Michael's testimony about Sarah, separating him from Thomas could be seen as interfering with an active police investigation." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Thomas. Some things are better left in the past. Some secrets are about to come to light," Laura interrupted, holding up her phone. "The warrant just came through. We'll be searching the Crawford Foundation offices within the hour. All files, all records, particularly anything related to Sarah Bennet or pregnant women placed in special care over the last 5 years." The change in Victoria Crawford was immediate and chilling. Her sophisticated mask fell away, revealing something hard and desperate beneath. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she hissed. "Do you think you're the only one with influence, Thomas? With power?" "No," Thomas replied calmly, standing to his full height. "But I'm the one with the truth on my side, and I will not stop until I understand exactly what happened to my wife and why you're so desperate to keep Michael away from me." James Crawford took his wife's arm. "Victoria, we're leaving." Mr. Wells handled this. He practically dragged her toward the door, but she turned back for one last shot. "That boy will never be yours, Thomas. And if you keep pushing, you might find that losing Sarah was only the beginning of what you can lose." After they left, Michael looked up at Thomas, his young face serious. "They're going to try to take me away, aren't they?" Thomas knelt in front of him, taking his good hand. "Listen to me carefully, Michael. Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever they try, I will not let you go. We're going to find Sarah. We're going to understand what happened. And we're going to be a family. I promise you that." Laura and Robert exchanged glances. They knew, even if Thomas didn't want to admit it, that the Crawfords were powerful enemies to make. The legal battle ahead would be brutal, and there was clearly more to Sarah's disappearance than anyone had imagined. But watching Thomas with Michael, seeing the natural way they gravitated toward each other, the instinctive trust and care between them, both silently agreed some fights were worth any cost. This was one of them. The Crawford Foundation's offices occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and chrome and carefully cultivated respectability. Detective Laura Martinez led her team through the pristine corridors, search warrant in hand, while Victoria Crawford's personal assistant trailed behind them, protesting each open drawer and examined file. "This is harassment," the assistant declared as Laura broke the lock on Victoria's private filing cabinet. "Mrs. Crawford has dedicated her life to helping troubled children." Laura ignored her, focusing on the documents emerging from the cabinet's depths. Beneath tax records and charity ball invitations, she found something that made her breath catch, a file labeled Project Legacy, its contents heavily redacted. "Get forensics in here," she ordered. "I want every deleted word recovered." Every document analyzed. Her phone buzzed a text from Thomas. Michael remembered more. Sarah was wearing a hospital bracelet when he met her. Not from Boston General. Meanwhile, across town, Robert Sullivan was deep in his own investigation. Years of friendship with Thomas had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that Sarah's disappearance and the Crawfords' interest in Michael were connected by something darker than philanthropy. Check every private hospital and clinic within 100 miles, he instructed his team. Focus on any connection to the Crawford Foundation, especially their special care programs for pregnant women. The pieces began falling into place with frightening speed. A pattern emerged: young mothers vanishing, babies adopted through the foundation to wealthy families, massive donations changing hands. But Sarah had been different. She'd escaped. At the Bennett mansion, Thomas worked to keep Michael safe while pursuing his own angles. He'd installed state-of-the-art security systems and hired additional guards, all too aware of Victoria Crawford's veiled threats. "Tell me again about the hospital bracelet," he urged Michael gently. They sat in the library, the boy's injured arm propped on pillows as he struggled to remember details. "It was white, with blue writing," Michael said, brow furrowed in concentration. "I saw it when she gave me food. She tried to hide it, but I'm good at noticing things. You have to be on the streets." "Did you see any words? Numbers?" Michael closed his eyes. There was a symbol, like a tree. And letters. P and L, I think. Thomas's phone rang. "Robert." "Providence Lakes Private Hospital," his friend said without preamble. "It's owned by a subsidiary of the Crawford Foundation. They specialize in discreet maternity care. And Thomas, they've had 6 fires in 5 years, all in their records room." "Destroying evidence," Thomas growled. "What have you found about their adoption programs?" "That's the thing. On paper, they're pristine. But I've been talking to former employees. The Crawfords have been running what amounts to a high-end baby trafficking operation. They target vulnerable pregnant women, especially those with complicated situations." "Sarah wasn't vulnerable," Thomas objected. "She was happy, successful." "And carrying your child," Robert cut in. "Think, Thomas, what would that baby be worth? A Bennett heir with your resources and connections." The implication hit Thomas like a physical blow. He looked at Michael, who was pretending not to listen while drawing in his notebook. The boy had survived on the streets through wit and observation. He'd seen Sarah, talked to her when everyone else had failed to find her. They threatened her, Thomas realized. They must have found out about the pregnancy and tried to force her into their program. But she ran. "And they've been looking for her ever since," Robert confirmed. "Thomas, be careful. If they're willing to go to these lengths..." A crash from outside interrupted him. Michael's head snapped up, his street-honed instincts already alert. Thomas moved to the window in time to see dark figures scaling the security fence. "They're here," he said quietly, ending the call. "Michael, remember what we practiced? The safe room." Michael was already moving, years of survival experience evident in his silent, efficient motion despite his injured arm. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. Go." As Michael disappeared behind the hidden panel, Thomas activated the mansion's security protocols. Lights blazed, alarms blared, and steel shutters began descending over the windows. His phone buzzed again. Laura this time. "Thomas, the files. It's worse than we thought. The Crawfords aren't just selling babies. They're grooming them, placing them with specific families for some kind of long-term plan. Sarah must have discovered. The power cut out, plunging the mansion into darkness. Thomas's security system had backup generators, but the momentary blackness sent a chill down his spine. They're not here for Michael, he realized, speaking into the phone's darkness. Not just for him anyway. They're here to silence us before we can expose everything. Laura's voice was tight with urgency. Hold them off. Backup is coming. And Thomas? We found something else. Sarah left a message hidden in the Foundation's files. It's addressed to you, dated just last week. The first window shattered before she could say more. Thomas dropped the phone, moving silently toward the safe room. Whatever the Crawfords were planning, whatever secret Sarah had uncovered, one thing was clear: the truth was finally emerging, and it was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Behind the hidden panel, Michael waited in the darkness, his good hand clutching Sarah's locket. He'd survived on the streets through instinct and observation. Now those same skills told him that everything is future. Thomas's life, Sarah's freedom hinged on what would happen in the next few minutes. The sound of footsteps echoed through the mansion, drawing closer. The game of secrets and lies was about to end, one way or another. Detective Laura Martinez spread the recovered files across her office desk, pieces of a puzzle 5 years in the making. Each document revealed a new layer of the Crawford Foundation's operations, but Sarah Bennett's case stood out as unique. "Look at this," she said to Robert Sullivan, pointing to a partially burned document. Sarah wasn't just another victim, she was investigating them from the inside. The paper detailed Sarah's visits to Providence Lakes Hospital in the months before her disappearance, not as a patient, but as a volunteer physician. Her signature appeared on dozens of medical charts, all belonging to pregnant women who later vanished from the system. She was gathering evidence, Robert realized, scanning the dates. These visits increased right before she disappeared. And look, she was accessing their financial records too. Laura nodded grimly. The Crawfords weren't just running an adoption scheme. They were selecting specific genetic profiles, matching mothers to predetermined buyers. Sarah must have discovered their eugenics program. The evidence was damning. Detailed genetic testing, carefully arranged matches, enormous sums changing hands. But it was a handwritten note in Sarah's familiar script that made their blood run cold. They're building something, not just families and empire. God help us all if they succeed. At that moment, Dr. Emily Watson arrived, clutching a worn medical file. "I should have come forward sooner," she said, her voice heavy with guilt. "Sarah came to me the day before she disappeared. She wasn't just pregnant, she was carrying twins." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Laura grabbed her phone, dialing Thomas's number. When it went straight to voicemail, she cursed. The Crawfords must have known. Twins with the Bennett genetic profile? They would have been the crown jewels of their program. "There's more," Emily continued. "Sarah left something with me. She said if anything happened to her, I should wait 5 years, then give it to Thomas." She pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Robert took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph and a USB drive. The photo showed Sarah, obviously pregnant, standing in front of a familiar building. "That's the old St. Agnes orphanage," he said. "It closed years ago." "Not closed," Laura corrected, pulling up records on her computer. "Purchased by a shell company linked to the Crawford Foundation. They converted it into a special care facility." Emily leaned forward, studying the photo. The date stamp. This was taken 3 months after she disappeared. She was still alive, still pregnant. Laura was already mobilizing her team. St. Agnes is where they're keeping her. It has to be. But why would Sarah wait 5 years to reveal this? The answer came from the USB drive. Robert plugged it into Laura's secure computer, and Sarah's voice filled the room, a recording made 5 years ago. "Thomas, my love. If you're hearing this, I'm still alive, but in terrible danger. The Crawfords project is bigger than illegal adoptions. They're creating a network of influenced children placed in positions of power. Our babies, yes babies. Where having twins would have been their masterpiece. Bennett genes, your connections, all under their control. I couldn't let that happen. The recording continued, Sarah's voice growing stronger. I've spent years gathering evidence, building a case they can't escape. But I needed time for the children they've placed to grow older, to be beyond their reach when this breaks. Time for the right person to find you, to help you understand. Watch for a boy with blue eyes and a heart of gold. He'll lead you to me. Laura was already reaching for her radio. All units converge on St. Agnes. Full tactical response. Possible hostage situation. Robert stared at the photo, at Sarah's determined expression. She planned this. All of it. Even Michael. Not Michael, Emily interjected. That was fate. Sarah couldn't have known he'd saved Thomas's life. But she knew someone would come, someone who could break through Thomas's walls and help him see the truth. The office erupted into activity as Laura's team prepared for the raid. But amidst the chaos, Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Thomas's security system perimeter breach at Bennett Mansion. Multiple intruders. They know, Laura realized. They know we've figured it out. They're moving on Thomas and Michael while we focus on St. Agnes. Emily clutched Sarah's file to her chest. What do we do? Split our forces. Laura's expression hardened. No, that's what they want. Thomas can handle himself for a few minutes. We hit St. Agnes with everything we have. The Crawfords themselves will be there. They'll want to move Sarah before we can reach her. How can you be sure? Robert asked. Because that's where the evidence is. 5 years of their operation, all the records Sarah collected. They'll try to destroy everything. Laura checked her weapon. And because Sarah's message mentioned twins, but Michael only ever saw her with one baby. The implications hung heavy in the air. Somewhere in that converted orphanage, Sarah Bennett was still holding on to secrets and possibly to one of her children. The next few hours would determine not just her fate, but the future of countless families touched by the Crawfords' twisted vision. As Laura's team moved out, Robert made one last call to the backup security team he'd stationed near the Bennett mansion. Thomas and Michael are the bait, he said grimly. The Crawfords want us divided. Don't let them succeed. The pieces were finally in place. 5 years of patience, planning, and pain were about to culminate in one night of revelation and reckoning. Sarah's gambit, her sacrifice to protect not just her own children, but all the children caught in the Crawfords' web, was approaching its endgame. The safe room in the Bennett mansion was designed to be impenetrable, but Michael knew better than anyone that no fortress was truly unbreakable. Years on the streets had taught him that there were always weak points, always ways in or out. Mr. Bennett, he whispered into the darkness. Dad, the second word still felt strange on his tongue, but right now it was the only thing keeping his fear at bay. The sounds of intruders echoed through the mansion's halls, footsteps, whispered commands, the occasional crash of something valuable being knocked over. Michael pressed his ear against the hidden door, using the skills that had kept him alive on the streets to track their movements. Thomas's voice came from somewhere nearby, calm but urgent. Stay quiet, Michael. No matter what you hear, stay hidden. Then came the sound Michael had been dreading, the scrape of metal on metal, the click of a lock being expertly picked. The safe room's door, supposedly unpickable, began to open. Well, well, Victoria Crawford's voice dripped with false sweetness. What a clever hiding place. Did you really think we wouldn't find you? Michael backed away, his injured arm throbbing as he pressed himself against the far wall. 2 men in black tactical gear entered, their movements professional and precise. Behind them, Victoria Crawford stood in an expensive suit that seemed out of place among the violence. Don't touch him, Thomas's shout was followed by the sound of a struggle. Restrain Mr. Bennett, Victoria ordered. Carefully. We don't want any unfortunate accidents. Yet. The men moved toward Michael, but street instinct took over. He feinted left, then dove right, slipping between them with the agility that had saved him countless times before. But his injured arm slowed him just enough a hand caught his jacket, spinning him around. "Let me go," Michael fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal. "Mr. Bennet." "Dad." Victoria's laugh was cold. "Dad? Oh, you poor, deluded child. Did you really think he could be your father? That you could trade the streets for a mansion just by saving his life? He's more of a father than you've ever been to any of the children you've stolen." Michael spat back, surprising everyone with his defiance. Victoria's face hardened. "Stolen? We give children better lives. We place them where they can serve a greater purpose, just like your friend Sarah's babies will." Michael went still. "You know where she is." "Of course we do. We've always known. Just like we've known about you, watching our operation, seeing things you shouldn't. Did you think it was coincidence that you were there to save Thomas?" The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. You were watching me. And for months. Ever since Sarah made the mistake of trusting you, we knew you'd lead us to her eventually. And now you have through Thomas. It's all worked out perfectly. Thomas's voice rang out, fierce with protective rage. "If you hurt him." "Hurt him," Victoria smiled. "Mr. Bennet, we're going to give him exactly what he wants, a family. Just not yours." She nodded to her men. One of them produced a syringe, its contents gleaming in the dim light. "No!" both Thomas and Michael shouted at once. Michael fought harder, but adult strength won out. The needle stung, and warmth began spreading through his veins. His last conscious sight was Thomas breaking free from his captors, reaching for him with desperate hands. "Dad," he mumbled as darkness took him. "Find Sarah." When Michael awoke, he was in a sterile room that smelled of antiseptic. Through the haze of sedation, he heard voices arguing outside his door. "Can't keep him here. He's not part of the program," a man's voice, James Crawford. "He knows too much," Victoria replied. "About Sarah, about the operation. Besides, think of the symmetry. The street rat who tried to steal a family will help us control the man trying to expose us. And Thomas will do exactly what we want if he ever wants to see the boy alive again. And by the time he realizes the truth about Sarah's other child, it will be too late." Michael fought the drugs, forcing his mind to focus. Other child? The twins Dr. Watson had mentioned? He had to stay alert, had to remember everything he heard. Thomas would come for him, his father would come for him. And when he did, Michael would be ready. In the mansion's ruined safe room, Thomas Bennet stood among scattered papers and broken equipment, his hands clenched into fists. Detective Martinez and her team had arrived too late. The Crawfords and their men were gone, taking Michael with them. "We'll find him," Laura promised, but Thomas barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on something the kidnappers had dropped in the struggle: a hospital ID badge from Providence Lake's private hospital. The same hospital where Sarah had disappeared, where she had uncovered the Crawfords' horrific breeding program. "They took my son," Thomas said, his voice deadly quiet. "They took my boy to force my cooperation, just like they took my wife to steal my children." Laura touched his arm. "Thomas, there's more. The raid on St. Agnes Sarah left another message. The Crawfords didn't just want your genes for their program. They wanted your pain. They've been orchestrating this for years, pushing you to the breaking point." "Why?" "Because broken men are controllable. They wanted you desperate enough to do anything to get your family back, including signing over control of Bennett Enterprises to their shell companies." Thomas straightened, a dangerous light in his eyes. "Then they don't know me very well. They think they've broken me? They'd just removed the last reason I had to play by the rules." He picked up Sarah's locket from where it had fallen in the struggle, running his thumb over its tarnished surface. "Call Robert. Call every contact we have. I want the full resources of Bennett Enterprises focused on one goal: burning the Crawfords' empire to the ground and finding my family." Laura nodded grimly. "What about their blackmail? The evidence they claim to have? Let them release it. Let them try to destroy my reputation. None of it matters anymore." Thomas's voice was iron. "They took my son. They're holding my wife. Somewhere out there I have another child I've never met. The time for caution is over." The detective recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same look she'd seen in Michael during the kidnapping, fighting against grown men to protect his new father. Like father, like son, neither of them knew how to give up on family. The hunt was on, and the Crawfords were about to learn a harsh lesson. They hadn't broken Thomas Bennett. They'd unchained him. St. Agnes Orphanage loomed against the night sky, its Gothic architecture a dark monument to secrets and suffering. Detective Laura Martinez led her tactical team through the shadows, their movements silent and precise. Years of investigating the Crawfords had led to this moment. Inside, Sarah Bennett sat in a locked room, her hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. 5 years of captivity had taken their toll, but her eyes remained sharp, alert. She'd heard the commotion downstairs, Victoria Crawford's panicked orders, the sound of files being shredded, computers being wiped. "They're coming," she whispered to her unborn child. "Just like I planned. Just hold on a little longer." The door burst open. James Crawford stood there, his usual polished demeanor cracking. "Move her," he barked to the guards. "Now, take the tunnel to the backup facility." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "It's too late, James. You've lost." "Lost," he grabbed her arm roughly. "Your husband is about to sign over everything to save that street rat you befriended. Our plan worked perfectly." "Did it?" Sarah's voice was calm. "Did you really think I spent 5 years here just waiting to be rescued? That I didn't have my own plans?" A distant explosion rocked the building, Laura's team breaching the main entrance. James's grip tightened painfully. "The evidence is gone," he snarled. "Everything you thought you collected, every record you tried to hide, we've destroyed it all." Sarah's laugh was unexpected, almost musical. "You still don't understand. The evidence was never in your files. It's in the children themselves, the ones you place so carefully in positions of power. Did you check their blood types lately? Their genetic markers?" James's face went pale. "What did you do?" "I'm a doctor, remember? While you were watching my medical records, making sure I stayed healthy enough to carry Thomas's child, I was watching your special adoptions, changing test results, switching samples, all those perfect genetic matches you promised your buyers. Not so perfect after all?" Another explosion closer now. Sarah could hear shouts, gunfire. "You're lying," James whispered, but doubt had crept into his voice. "Am I? Check the records, the real ones, not the ones you faked. Half your designer babies aren't what you promised. When those families find out they paid millions for ordinary children, that their precious genetic dynasty is built on lies, well, I imagine they won't be very happy." James raised his hand to strike her, but Sarah didn't flinch. "Go ahead. But remember, I'm still carrying a child you need. The last true Bennett heir, since you lost the first one." "We didn't lose anything," he spat. "That boy is exactly where we want him. Victoria will break his spirit, just like we broke yours." Sarah's eyes flashed. "You never broke me. Everything I did, every moment of captivity, every humiliation was to protect my children. All of them. Including Michael." The door crashed open again. This time it was Victoria, her designer suit dusty from the chaos downstairs. "The police are inside. We need to move." "She's been playing us," James said. "The genetic tests, the placements." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "It doesn't matter. We still have her. We have the street rat, and soon we'll have Bennett Enterprises. Nobody will care about a few switched test results. You're wrong, Sarah said quietly. Thomas will care, and so will Michael, my son. Victoria froze. What did you say? Why do you think I helped him that night? Why do you think I gave him the locket? Michael is my son, my firstborn, the one I had to give up when I was young and alone, the one you never knew about because you only cared about genetic profiles and breeding programs. The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. All this time, Michael had been more than just a street child who'd seen too much. He was the missing piece of the Bennett family, lost and found in the most unlikely way. Impossible, Victoria breathed. Check his DNA against mine, against Thomas's. Nature has a way of bringing families together, even when monsters like you try to tear them apart. The sound of gunfire was immediate now. Laura's voice echoed through the hall's police. Put down your weapons. James grabbed Sarah's arm again, dragging her toward the secret tunnel, but she was ready. 5 years of playing weak, playing broken, had been a cover. She'd kept herself strong, waiting for this moment. Sarah drove her elbow into James's solar plexus, twisting away as he doubled over. Victoria reached for her, but Sarah was already moving, her doctor's knowledge of anatomy making her strikes precise and devastating. Sarah, Laura's voice, closer now. Sarah Bennett. Here Sarah called back, blocking the tunnel entrance with a heavy shelf. I'm here. The next few minutes were chaos. Laura's team flooded the room, weapons raised. The Crawfords were cornered, their elaborate plan crumbling around them. As handcuffs clicked into place, Sarah faced her captors one last time. You wanted to create a dynasty? You should have remembered real family isn't about genetics. It's about love, the kind that makes a wealthy man care for a street child, the kind that helps a lost boy find his way home. Laura wrapped a blanket around Sarah's shoulders. Are you all right? The baby. Sarah nodded, tears finally falling. We're fine. But Michael, they have Michael and Thomas. Is tearing the city apart looking for you both. Let's get you out of here. Your family's waiting. As they left St. Agnes behind, Sarah clutched Thomas's locket, the twin to the one she'd given Michael. Soon she would hold both her sons, would see Thomas again, would finally have the family she'd sacrificed everything to protect. But first, they had to save Michael from Victoria's backup plan, a plan that even Sarah, with all her careful plotting, hadn't seen coming. The final battle for the Bennett family was just beginning. Providence Lake's private hospital stood abandoned on the outskirts of Boston, its empty windows like blind eyes staring into the night. Thomas Bennett's car screeched to a halt in the crumbling parking lot, his tires sending gravel spraying. Robert's voice crackled through his phone. Thomas, wait for backup. Martinez is on her way with Sarah. They'll kill Michael if I don't come alone. Thomas cut him off. You saw the video they sent. The video had arrived minutes after Sarah's rescue from St. Agnes. Michael, conscious but drugged. Victoria Crawford holding a scalpel to his throat. The message was clear: Bennett Enterprises for the boy's life. Thomas checked his watch. He had 10 minutes to reach the hospital's 3rd floor with the signed transfer documents, or Victoria would start sending Michael back to him in pieces. The thought made his hand shake as he grabbed the briefcase containing the papers. The hospital's main entrance was unlocked, inviting him into its darkness. Emergency lights cast sickly green shadows through empty corridors. The air smelled of decay and abandoned dreams like the ones that had died here when Sarah discovered the Crawfords' true purpose. Keep climbing, Mr. Bennett, Victoria's voice echoed through hidden speakers. And remember, no police, or the boy dies screaming. Thomas gritted his teeth, taking the stairs 2 at a time. His security training had taught him to spot surveillance cameras, and this place was full of them. Victoria was watching his every move. 3rd floor. Maternity ward. The irony wasn't lost on him. This was where it had all started, where Sarah had first uncovered the truth about the Crawfords' breeding program. Last door on the right, Victoria's voice guided him. "And Mr. Bennet? No heroics? You're here to sign over your company and take what's left of your son home." Thomas pushed open the indicated door. The scene inside made his blood freeze. Michael was strapped to an old hospital bed, conscious but groggy. Victoria stood beside him, surgical gloved hands hovering near a tray of gleaming instruments. Right on time, she smiled. "The papers." Thomas held up the briefcase. "Let him go first." "Oh, Thomas, you're not in a position to make demands." Victoria picked up a scalpel. "The papers, now." Dad, Michael's voice was weak but clear. Don't give them anything. I'm not afraid." Thomas's heart swelled with pride, even as fear clawed at his chest. This brave, incredible boy, his son, he now knew, through a miracle of fate and Sarah's long-ago sacrifice, was willing to suffer to protect him. Touching, Victoria sneered. "But futile. The papers, Mr. Bennet, or I start removing fingers." Thomas stepped forward slowly, briefcase extended, but his eyes were on Michael, trying to convey a message. The boy blinked once, understanding. He'd seen that look before, on the streets, the look of someone preparing to fight. "You know what I don't understand," Victoria, Thomas said conversationally, still moving forward. "Why this elaborate scheme? Why not just kill us all?" Victoria's laugh was harsh. "Kill you? No, death is too simple. We needed you broken, controlled. Your company, your resources, all serving our greater purpose. And what better way to control a man than through his family?" "Family," Thomas repeated. "Like the family you tried to steal from Sarah? The children you've been breeding and selling?" "We're creating a better world," Victoria snapped. "Placing the right children with the right families, building a network of influence that will span generations. Your genes, your wealth, they were supposed to be the cornerstone. Instead," Thomas said softly, "you've lost everything. Sarah's free, your files are exposed." And Michael, he smiled. "Michael's not just some street kid I took pity on. He's my son, Sarah's son. The one she had to give up years ago before she met me. The one who found his way home despite everything you did to prevent it." Victoria's composure cracked. The scalpel trembled in her hand. "You're lying." "DNA doesn't lie. Check your own records, the ones Sarah didn't alter. Michael has Bennet blood. All this time you thought you were manipulating us, but Sarah was the one playing the long game." As he spoke, Thomas had continued moving forward, drawing Victoria's attention. She didn't notice Michael working at his restraints, using skills learned on the streets to slip free. "Enough," Victoria raised the scalpel. "Sign the papers, or—" Michael moved faster than anyone would have thought possible in his drugged state. He rolled off the bed, taking the instrument tray with him. The crash startled Victoria, giving Thomas the opening he needed. He lunged, catching her wrist as she slashed with the scalpel. They grappled, years of rage and pain behind every move. Victoria fought with the desperate strength of someone seeing their life's work crumble, but Thomas had something stronger driving him: love for his family, finally whole after so many years. The scalpel clattered to the floor. Victoria reached for something in her pocket, a syringe, but Michael was there, sweeping her legs out from under her with a street fighter's precision. She went down hard as police sirens filled the air. Laura's voice boomed through a megaphone outside Victoria Crawford. "The building is surrounded. Surrender now." Victoria began to laugh, a broken sound. "You think this is over? Our network runs deeper than you can imagine. The children we've placed, the families we control, are all being contacted as we speak." Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, beautiful despite her ordeal, one hand protectively over her pregnant belly. "Every family, every child. The truth about their origins, about your lies. It's over, Victoria." Thomas helped Michael to his feet, holding him close as Sarah rushed to embrace them both. Their family, fractured and scattered for so long, was finally reunited. Victoria watched them with hatred burning in her eyes. "You'll never prove anything. We destroyed all the records." Sarah smiled. "I wasn't trying to prove what you did. I was making sure you couldn't do it anymore. The families you deceived will do that job for us." As Laura's team flooded the room, taking Victoria into custody, Thomas held his wife and son, marveling at the threads of fate that had brought them together. Michael, drowsy but determined, reached for Sarah's hand. "I knew," he mumbled. "Somehow, when you helped me on the streets, I knew you were special. Like family." Sarah kissed his forehead, tears falling. "You were always loved, always meant to find your way back to us. Both of you," she added, looking at Thomas. "My boys." Together, they walked out of Providence Lakes Hospital, leaving behind the darkness of the past and stepping into the light of a future they would shape together. The room they kept Michael in was clinically white, sterile, and utterly terrifying. Through the haze of drugs they kept pumping into his system, he tried to maintain his grip on reality, falling back on survival skills learned from the streets. Observe, remember, wait for an opening. Victoria Crawford visited daily, her designer heels clicking on the tile floor like a death knell. She'd sit beside his bed, speaking in that honey-poisoned voice about his new purpose in their grand plan. "You're special, Michael," she would say, adjusting his IV drip with manicured hands. A street rat who captured Thomas Bennett's heart. The perfect leverage. But you could be so much more if you cooperate. The drugs made it hard to think, hard to resist. They showed him videos of Thomas signing papers, of Sarah being held at St. Agnes, carefully edited to break his spirit. But Michael had learned early that hope was sometimes all you had, and he clung to it fiercely. "He'll come for me," Michael would mumble through cracked lips. "My dad will come." Victoria's response was always the same cold laugh. "Your dad? Oh, darling, Thomas Bennett stopped looking days ago. Signed everything over to us. You were just a charitable project to him, easily abandoned when the cost grew too high." But Michael knew better. He remembered the look in Thomas's eyes when he'd called him Dad for the first time, the genuine love that had grown between them. No amount of drugs could make him doubt that connection. The worst moments came at night. They'd lower the temperature in his room, making him shiver uncontrollably. Sleep deprivation, they called it, breaking down resistance through exhaustion. In those dark hours, Michael would recite street survival rules to himself, adding new ones for his current situation. Rule 1, they only win if you let them break you. Rule 2, remember who loves you. Rule 3, stay alert for any chance to escape. He catalogued everything: shift changes, the sounds of footsteps, the timing of medication doses. Even through the chemical fog, his street-honed instincts kept working, kept planning. The physical pain was bearable. He'd known worse on the streets. It was the psychological torture that cut deepest. Victoria would bring photographs of Thomas at charity events, smiling with other children. "See," she'd say, "already replaced you. That's what happens to street rats who dream too big." But Michael had seen genuine smiles and fake ones. He knew the difference between Thomas's public face and the real love they'd shared. He held on to memories of their day together: the roller coaster, the Ferris wheel, the moment Thomas had wiped ice cream from his chin with such natural fatherly care. One night, during a particularly brutal session of questioning about Sarah's activities, Michael started laughing. The sound startled his interrogators. "What's so funny?" Victoria demanded. "You don't understand family at all," Michael managed through split lips. "You think it's about control, about ownership, but it's about love. That's why you'll lose." The beating that followed was severe, but Michael barely felt it. He'd found a truth they couldn't touch, couldn't corrupt with their drugs and mind games. The days blurred together. They moved him between facilities, always one step ahead of the police. But they couldn't move him from his certainty that Thomas and Sarah would find him. That certainty became his anchor, keeping him sane through the worst moments. He learned to fake compliance, to appear more drugged than he was. He learned to read the shifting alliances among his captors, Victoria's growing instability, James's wavering conviction. Most importantly, he learned that their perfect plan had cracks, and those cracks were widening. When rescue finally came, Michael was ready. Despite the drugs, despite the pain, he played his part perfectly. His street fighting skills, combined with Thomas's perfect timing, brought Victoria down. But the real victory wasn't physical, it was in knowing that he'd never broken, never stopped believing in his newfound family. Later, safe in the hospital with his real family around him, Michael would learn the full extent of his captivity's impact. The drugs would take time to leave his system, the trauma would require therapy, but none of that mattered compared to the triumph of keeping his spirit intact. "You were so brave," Sarah whispered, holding him close. "So strong." Michael looked at his parents, his real parents, brought together by fate and love and unshakable determination. "I had something worth being strong for," he replied. "I had family." In the quiet of the hospital room, with Michael finally sleeping peacefully under proper medical care, Sarah revealed the full story to Thomas. Her hands trembled as she held the complete journal she'd kept during her 5 years of captivity. "I found out I was pregnant the day before I discovered the truth about the Crawfords," she began, her voice soft to avoid waking Michael. "Not just pregnant carrying twins. I was so happy, ready to tell you everything. Then I found the files." Thomas took her hand, encouraging her to continue. The weight of 5 years of separation hung between them. They had been watching us for months, profiling our genetics, our influence, our wealth. The Crawfords didn't just want babies to sell, they wanted to create a network of perfectly placed children who would grow up to control key positions in society. Our twins would have been their crowning achievement. She paused, touching her stomach where their second child still grew. Victoria approached me at the hospital that day. She showed me proof of what they'd done to other mothers who refused them. Women who'd disappeared children who'd vanished into their system. Then she made her threat. Tears began falling as Sarah recalled that moment. She said they would take you down, destroy everything you'd built, unless I cooperated. But cooperation meant giving up our babies to their program, letting them place our children with families of their choosing, never knowing them. Thomas's grip on her hand tightened. "So you ran." "I ran, but I also started gathering evidence. Every placement, every illegal adoption, every genetic manipulation. I knew it would take years to build a case they couldn't escape. Years during which I couldn't contact you, couldn't risk them hurting you or our children." She turned to look at Michael's sleeping form. "Then I found him on the streets. This brave, beautiful boy with your determination and my heart. I didn't know then that he was the baby I'd given up years before, during my residency, but something in me recognized him." "Why didn't you tell him who you were?" Thomas asked gently. Sarah wiped away tears. "Because I knew the Crawfords were watching him, using him to track me. I could only help him in small ways, give him the locket, hope that somehow he would find his way to you." "And he did, he saved your life." The weight of her sacrifice pressed down on them both. 5 years of isolation, of watching her family from afar, of carrying the burden of terrible knowledge alone. "The hardest part," she whispered, "was seeing you both suffering and not being able to reach out. Watching you withdraw into yourself, Thomas. Seeing Michael struggle on the streets. Every day I wanted to run to you both, but I knew if I did, the Crawfords would destroy everything." Thomas pulled her into his arms, careful of her pregnant belly. "You sacrificed everything to protect us, to expose their crimes." "I sacrificed years with my family," Sarah corrected, her voice breaking. "Years we can never get back. Michael's childhood, your happiness, our life together. Was it worth it?" As if in answer, Michael stirred in his sleep, mumbling, "Mum, Dad." Sarah moved to his bedside, smoothing his hair back. "Yes, sweetheart, we're here." "Not going anywhere?" he asked drowsily, still affected by the medication. "Never again," Sarah promised, her voice firm despite her tears. "We're staying right here." After Michael drifted back to sleep, Sarah turned to Thomas. "The Crawfords' network is exposed now. Their perfect families are learning the truth. But the cost." "The cost was high," Thomas acknowledged. "But look what we gained. Our son found his way home. Our second child will be born into freedom. And you, Sarah, you didn't just save our family. You saved countless others from the Crawfords' manipulation." Sarah leaned into his embrace, watching Michael sleep. "I kept telling myself that every day in that place, that the pain would be worth it if I could just protect our children, expose the truth, find my way back to you." "You did more than find your way back," Thomas murmured. "You brought our whole family together. Michael, you, our unborn child, were all here because you were strong enough to make that impossible choice 5 years ago." Sarah placed her hand over his on her stomach, feeling their baby kick. "No more impossible choices," she said softly. "From now on, we make our decisions together as a family." They stayed like that through the night, watching over their sleeping son, united at last after years of sacrifice and separation. The price of their reunion had been steep, but as Sarah had known all along, family was worth any cost. In the days following their reunion, Thomas Bennett wrestled with the weight of decisions that had brought them to this point. Each night, after Sarah and Michael had fallen asleep, he would stand at the hospital window, watching the city lights and replaying every moment that had led them here. His corporate empire was in shambles. The transfer documents he'd signed under duress, though now legally void, had exposed vulnerabilities in Bennett Enterprises that competitors were eager to exploit. Board members were jumping ship, stocks were plummeting, and 5 generations of family business teetered on the brink of collapse. Mr. Bennett Robert arrived each morning with fresh reports of damage, each worse than the last. "The Asian markets are pulling out. We're looking at losses in the billions." But Thomas found he couldn't focus on the numbers anymore. His attention kept drifting to Michael's hospital bed, where his son was slowly recovering from his ordeal, or to Sarah, whose strength through 5 years of captivity humbled him. "Let it fall," he said finally, surprising both Robert and himself. "The money, the company, the Bennett legacy, none of it matters compared to what I nearly lost." The decision wasn't easy. Thomas had been raised to believe that the family business was sacred, that maintaining and growing their wealth was his primary purpose. His own father would have been appalled at his willingness to let it all slip away. Late one night, as he grappled with the implications of his choice, Sarah found him in the hospital chapel. She didn't speak, just took his hand and waited. "I should be fighting harder to save the company," he confessed. "It's what a Bennett would do." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You are fighting for what matters most. The company can be rebuilt. Family can't." The truth of those words struck deep. Thomas remembered the years after Sarah's disappearance, when he'd thrown himself into work, using wealth as a shield against pain. How hollow that existence had been until Michael had crashed into his life, teaching him what really mattered. The next morning, Thomas called an emergency board meeting from Michael's hospital room. His son watched with curious eyes as Thomas addressed the assembled executives via video conference. "Gentlemen," Thomas began, "Bennett Enterprises was founded on the principle of building lasting value. For years, I thought that meant financial value. I was wrong." He outlined his plans, selling off non-essential assets, restructuring the company around its charitable foundation, focusing on projects that helped families like Michael had once been. The board was stunned. "You're talking about dismantling an empire," one director protested. "Your father's legacy." "My father's legacy was about more than money," Thomas interrupted. "It was about family. about doing what's right, no matter the cost. I'm honoring that legacy by choosing my family over fortune. The resignation letters started arriving within hours. Stock prices fell further. But Thomas felt lighter than he had in years. That evening, Michael approached his bed hesitantly. "Dad, are you really giving up everything because of us?" Thomas pulled his son close. "No, Michael. I'm not giving up anything. I'm gaining everything that matters." Sarah joined them, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "We'll start over," she said softly. "Together." The choice became clearer with each passing day. As Michael grew stronger, as Sarah's pregnancy progressed normally, as their family bonds deepened, Thomas realized that his sacrifice wasn't really a sacrifice at all. The final test came when Victoria Crawford's lawyers offered a deal: retract the accusations, reinstate the company transfers, and they would ensure the Bennett name remained untarnished. Thomas's response was to release everything, all of Sarah's evidence, all the proof of the Crawfords' crimes, regardless of the collateral damage to Bennett Enterprises' reputation. "You're choosing destruction," Victoria spat during her final court appearance. "No," Thomas replied calmly. "I'm choosing truth. I'm choosing family. Something you never understood." Later, holding Michael and Sarah close, watching the sun set on the empire he'd once thought defined him, Thomas Bennett finally understood what real wealth looked like. It wasn't in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It was in his son's recovering smile, his wife's unwavering strength, and the future they would build together. "No regrets?" Sarah asked softly. Thomas looked at his family, the family he'd nearly lost to greed and ambition, and smiled. "Not one." The Bennett fortune might be gone, but the Bennett family was stronger than ever, and that, Thomas knew, was worth any price. The courtroom fell silent as Detective Laura Martinez took the stand, her evidence files spread before her like a roadmap of corruption. Victoria and James Crawford sat at the defense table, their polished appearances already beginning to crack under the weight of revelations. "Detective Martinez," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court what you discovered at Providence Lakes Hospital." Laura opened the first file, her voice steady. "We found records of 47 forced adoptions over a 5-year period. Pregnant women were coerced, threatened, or drugged into giving up their babies. These children were then placed with families chosen by the Crawfords, not based on suitability, but on potential for future influence. Photographs appeared on the courtroom screens, hidden rooms at the hospital, detailed genetic profiles, massive financial transfers. The systematic nature of the Crawfords' operation became horrifyingly clear." "The Crawfords weren't running an adoption agency," Laura continued. "They were creating a network of controlled assets. Each child was placed strategically with judges, politicians, business leaders to be groomed for positions of power." Victoria Crawford's mask of composure cracked slightly as Laura revealed the next piece of evidence: a recorded conversation between Victoria and a pregnant Sarah Bennett 5 years ago. Sarah's voice filled the courtroom. "You can't do this. These are children, not pawns." Victoria's response was chilling. "Their investments, Dr. Bennett. Your twins with their perfect genetic profile and their father's connections will be our masterpiece." The jury visibly recoiled. James Crawford began writing furiously on a legal pad, likely planning some damage control strategy, but Victoria sat eerily still, a strange smile playing at her lips. Laura continued methodically through the evidence: offshore accounts, hiding millions in adoption fees, medical records showing forced medications, surveillance reports on families who had been targeted. "And what about Michael Bennett?" the prosecutor asked. "Michael was an unexpected variable," Laura explained. "The Crawfords didn't know his true identity when they began watching him. They saw him only as a street child who might lead them to Sarah. When he saved Thomas Bennett's life, they realized they could use him as leverage." Victoria's strange smile widened. Leverage, she interrupted, ignoring her lawyer's attempt to silence her. We gave that street rat a purpose. Just like we gave all those unwanted children better lives than they deserved. The judge gavelled for order, but Victoria was beyond caring about courtroom protocol. Years of careful manipulation were unraveling, and with them, her carefully maintained facade. "You self-righteous fools," she spat. "We were building something magnificent. A generation of perfect children, placed perfectly, guided by our vision. We were creating the future." "You were trafficking human beings," Laura corrected calmly. "Using children as commodities, destroying families for profit and power." The evidence continued to mount. Sarah's detailed records of her captivity, medical files showing the true parentage of supposedly perfect genetic matches, financial trails leading to bribed officials and threatened families. But it was the final piece of evidence that sealed the Crawfords' fate. Laura produced a series of letters, written by the children themselves, now teenagers, describing their experiences in the Crawfords program. Stories of psychological manipulation, forced separation from birth parents, constant pressure to fulfill the roles they'd been placed in. As the letters were read aloud, Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. "They should be grateful," she screamed. "We gave them everything." "No," Laura responded quietly. "You took everything from them. Their choices, their true families, their freedom to be anything other than what you planned." The courtroom erupted into chaos as Victoria lunged across the table, years of controlled ambition dissolving into raw fury. As she was restrained, her carefully constructed world of influence and control crumbled around her, leaving only the truth exposed in its harsh light. The Crawfords' conspiracy was finally laid bare, and with it the full scope of their twisted vision for a future they would never now control. In the hospital's private family room, Sarah finally shared the complete story of her separation, her voice steady despite the pain of remembrance. Thomas and Michael sat close, their presence giving her strength to reveal the darkest moments of her ordeal. It started with a routine prenatal check at Providence Lake. Sarah began, her hand absently touching her pregnant belly. "I noticed discrepancies in some patient files, mothers who disappeared, babies with suspicious adoption records. When I started asking questions, Victoria Crawford invited me to her office." Thomas squeezed her hand as she continued. "She showed me photographs first. You, Thomas, at business meetings, at home, even sleeping. They'd been watching us for months. Then she brought out the threats, evidence they'd manufactured of medical malpractice, enough to destroy my career." Michael leaned closer, his street-learned instincts recognizing the familiar pattern of powerful people exploiting the vulnerable. Sarah reached out to stroke his hair, drawing comfort from the contact. "But I could have fought those accusations," Sarah continued. "What broke me was when Victoria revealed their true plan. They hadn't chosen us just for our genes or your wealth, Thomas. They wanted our children because of what you'd become if you lost us." The revelation hung heavy in the air. Thomas's voice was hoarse when he spoke. "They wanted me broken." Sarah nodded. A broken man running a powerful company, easily manipulated through hope of finding his family. Victoria explained it all with such pride, how they'd use your resources, your connections, all while dangling the possibility of reunion just out of reach. "So you ran," Michael said softly. "To protect Dad." "To protect both of you," Sarah corrected. "I knew if I stayed, they'd take our babies, place them with families under their control. And you, Thomas, they would have destroyed you slowly, feeding you false leads, watching you tear yourself apart, searching for us." Tears finally broke through her composure. "The hardest part wasn't leaving, it was staying away. Watching you suffer, Thomas, seeing you withdraw into yourself. Then finding Michael on the streets, recognizing my firstborn son but not daring to reveal myself for fear of the Crawfords finding him too." Thomas pulled her close, his own tears falling. "You sacrificed everything to protect us." "Not everything," Sarah whispered. "I never lost hope." I knew someday Michael would find you, that his heart would break through your walls. I knew you'd recognize the locket, start asking questions. I just had to stay hidden long enough to gather evidence, to ensure when the truth came out, the Crawfords couldn't escape justice." Michael touched the locket he still wore. "You planned it all? Me saving Dad?" Sarah smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart. That was fate, or perhaps just your innate goodness. The same goodness that helped you survive the streets without becoming hard, that made you risk your life for a stranger." "But why 5 years?" Thomas asked. "Why wait so long?" "Because I needed their network to grow complacent, to place enough children that when the truth came out, their whole system would collapse. Each child they placed thinking they were building their empire was actually a piece of evidence against them." The full weight of her sacrifice, her strategic patience, her lonely vigil settled over them. 5 years of separation, of watching her family suffer, all to ensure when justice finally came, it would be complete. "No more separations," Thomas declared firmly. "No more sacrifices. From now on, we face everything together." Sarah looked at her reunited family, Thomas, strong yet gentle Michael, wise beyond his years, their unborn child, growing safely beneath her heart. The price of protecting them had been enormous, but seeing them together, she knew she would pay it again if necessary. Together, she agreed, holding them close. Always together. The day of the Crawford sentencing drew a crowd that filled the courthouse steps. Families who had been torn apart by their schemes stood shoulder to shoulder with adopted children discovering their true histories. Among them, Thomas Bennett held Sarah's hand on one side and Michael's on the other, their unity a testament to love's triumph over manipulation. Father O'Connor, who had sheltered so many of the street children affected by the Crawfords' actions, addressed the gathering. "Today isn't just about punishment," he declared. "It's about healing. About recognizing that family isn't defined by genetics or social status, but by love and choice." Inside the courtroom, Judge Parker prepared to deliver his verdict. Victoria and James Crawford sat expressionless as he began speaking. "In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty masked as benevolence," he stated. "You didn't just traffic in children, you trafficked in hope, in dreams, in the fundamental human desire for family." The sentences were severe, 30 years each, no possibility of parole. But the judge wasn't finished. He ordered the Crawford Foundation's assets liquidated, the funds to be used for a new organization dedicated to reuniting families and supporting children in need. As Victoria was led away, she turned to face the Bennett family one last time. "We gave those children better lives," she insisted. "We gave them purpose." "No," Michael spoke up, his voice clear and strong. "You gave them chains. Family gives purpose. Love gives purpose. I learned that on the streets, watching people with nothing share everything they had." The community's response to the verdict was immediate and overwhelming. Families affected by the Crawford scheme began connecting, sharing stories, offering support. The network they created wasn't built on manipulation and control, but on understanding and compassion. Dr. Emily Watson offered her clinic as a center for DNA testing and family reunification. "Sarah showed us that medicine should heal families, not tear them apart," she announced, establishing a program to help adopted children explore their histories safely and ethically. Detective Laura Martinez worked with Robert Sullivan to create a task force dedicated to preventing similar schemes. "The Crawfords aren't the only ones who tried to commodify family," she explained. "But thanks to the Bennett's courage, we now know how to spot and stop these operations." The support extended beyond institutions. Mrs. Chen, who had helped Michael survive on the streets, opened her store as a safe haven for homeless youth. "Family isn't always blood," she said simply. "Sometimes it's a sandwich shared with a hungry child." Thomas used what remained of his resources to establish the Bennett Family Foundation, dedicated to supporting street children and reuniting separated families. The organization's first project was renovating the old Providence Lakes Hospital into a community center. This place once represented the worst of human nature, Thomas declared at the opening ceremony. Now it will showcase the best our capacity to heal, to help, to create real families based on love rather than agenda. The community's embrace of this mission proved that the Crawfords' fall had created space for something far more powerful to rise. Where they had built walls, bridges now formed. Where they had sowed fear and isolation, connection and support now flourished. But Sarah, now in her final month of pregnancy, watched these changes with quiet satisfaction. This is what real influence looks like, she told her family. Not controlling people, but empowering them to help each other. Michael, no longer the scared street child, but a confident young man who knew his place in the world, nodded in agreement. The Crawfords thought family was about power, he said. But it's really about love. And love only grows stronger when you share it. As justice was served, the healing began not just for the Bennett family, but for an entire community learning to redefine what family truly means. The day Sarah went into labor, Boston experienced its first snowfall of the year. Thomas and Michael paced the hospital corridor, while Dr. Emily Watson attended the delivery, their footsteps creating parallel tracks in the pristine hallway. "Do you think the baby will look like Mom?" Michael asked, his voice betraying both excitement and nervousness about meeting his sibling. Thomas smiled, pulling his son close. "If we're lucky. Your mother's strength and beauty would be a wonderful inheritance," he paused, studying Michael's face. "Though I see plenty of her in you too, that same determination, that same capacity for love." The hours passed slowly, marked by occasional updates from nurses and the steady tick of the wall clock. Father O'Connor arrived, bringing coffee and quiet support. Mrs. Chen followed with homemade dumplings, insisting they needed to keep up their strength. Finally, Dr. Watson emerged, beaming. "Would you like to meet your daughter?" They entered the room to find Sarah propped up in bed, cradling a tiny bundle. Her face, though tired, glowed with joy. "Come meet Emily Rose Bennett," she said softly. Michael approached the bed cautiously, peering at his baby sister's face. The infant's eyes opened, startlingly blue like his own, and fixed on him with surprising intensity. "Hi, Emily," he whispered. "I'm your big brother. I've been waiting a long time to meet you." Sarah shifted the baby so Michael could hold her, teaching him how to support her head. The moment the child settled into his arms, something profound passed between them, a connection that transcended the years of separation and pain. Thomas watched his children together, his heart so full it felt near bursting. This was what the Crawfords had tried to prevent, what Sarah had sacrificed everything to protect, the simple, powerful beauty of family bound by love rather than scheme or strategy. "We're all here now," Sarah said, reaching for Thomas's hand. "All of us together at last." Emily began to fuss, and Michael instinctively started swaying, humming a lullaby he remembered from his own early childhood. The baby quieted, turning toward his voice. "She knows her brother," Thomas observed, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course she does," Sarah replied. Love recognizes love. As snow continued falling outside the hospital windows, the Bennett family savored their first moments truly complete. The room filled with quiet joy, healing the last wounds of their long separation. Dr. Watson, watching from the doorway, smiled at the scene. "This is what family should be," she murmured to herself, thinking of all the other families still healing from the Crawford schemes. But looking at the Bennetts, Thomas's proud stance, Sarah's radiant happiness, Michael's gentle care of his sister, she knew they had created something more than just a happy ending. They had forged a template for healing, showing how love could triumph over manipulation, how family could be stronger for having been tested. Emily Rose Bennett, born into freedom rather than scheme, would grow up surrounded by that love, protected by a brother who had once lived on streets, guided by parents who had overcome impossible odds to be together. The snow kept falling, blanketing the city in white, offering a clean start for a family finally joyfully whole. 5 years after Emily's birth, Michael Bennett stood at the podium of Boston University's medical school graduation ceremony, his valedictorian speech cards trembling slightly in his hands. In the audience, Thomas and Sarah beamed with pride, while 5-year-old Emily bounced excitedly on her father's lap. "When I lived on the streets," Michael began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I used to sneak into the public library to read medical textbooks. The librarians thought I was crazy, this dirty kid poring over anatomy charts. But I had a dream." He paused, looking at his family. "What I didn't have was hope of achieving that dream, until 2 people showed me that love can transform lives. My father, Thomas Bennett, taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the lives we touch. My mother, Sarah Bennett, showed me that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about fighting for what's right." The audience sat captivated as Michael shared his journey from street child to medical student. He spoke of the free clinic he'd helped establish in his old neighborhood, where Mrs. Chen still handed out sandwiches to hungry kids. He talked about the scholarship program the Bennett Family Foundation had created for homeless youth pursuing medical careers. "Today, as I become Dr. Michael Bennett," he continued, "I'm not just fulfilling my own dream. I'm carrying forward a legacy of healing not just bodies, but families and communities." In the front row, Sarah wiped away tears of joy. Thomas held Emily close, remembering the scared boy who'd saved his life on a rainy night, now transformed into a confident young doctor. Emily waved her hand-drawn sign, "My big brother saves lives." After the ceremony, as they celebrated at home, Michael showed Emily his new white coat. "Want to hear my heart squirt?" he asked, letting her play with his stethoscope. "Will you be fixing people like Mommy does?" Emily asked, her blue eyes serious. "Something like that," Michael smiled. "But more than that, I'll be helping kids who are like I used to be, scared and alone, needing more than just medical care." Thomas watched his children together, marveling at how far they'd come. The street-smart boy who'd once dumpster-dived for food was now a doctor, while his baby sister grew up knowing only love and security. Sarah joined them, wrapping her arms around her family. "You did it, sweetheart," she said to Michael. "You turned pain into purpose." "We did it," Michael corrected. "All of us." Together he looked around their home, modest compared to the mansion they'd once lived in, but filled with more love than any palace could hold. The Bennett Family Foundation's work continued, transforming lives just as Michael's had been transformed. But perhaps their greatest achievement was simpler. They had proven that family, real family, could grow from the most unlikely beginnings. As evening fell, the Bennetts gathered in their backyard, sharing stories and dreams. Emily fell asleep in Michael's arms, trustingly certain of her place in the world. Looking at his sister, Michael silently renewed his promise to help other children find the same security, the same love that had saved him. His dream had become reality, but more importantly, it had become a bridge for others to follow. 10 years after the Crawfords' conviction, the Bennett Family Foundation hosted a gala celebrating a decade of transforming lives. The old Providence Lakes Hospital, now the Bennett Community Center, was filled with families whose lives had been touched by their work. Thomas, his hair now fully silver, stood at the podium beside Sarah, who remained as passionate as ever about helping others. A decade ago, he began, we learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or business empires. It's measured in the lives we touch, the families we help build. Dr. Michael Bennett, now the center's medical director, sat with his wife Claire, a former street child herself who'd become a child psychologist. Their 2-year-old son Thomas Jr. played quietly with his Aunt Emily, now a thoughtful teenager who volunteered at the center's youth program. Around the room, success stories abounded. Former street children who'd become teachers, doctors, lawyers, all giving back to the community that had helped them. Families reunited through the Foundation's DNA program shared tables with adoptive families who'd learned to embrace both biological and chosen connections. Mrs. Chen's daughter now ran a chain of food banks across the city, while Father O'Connor's youth shelter network had expanded nationwide. Detective Martinez, though retired, still consulted on family reunification cases, working alongside Robert Sullivan's legal advocacy team. The Crawfords thought they could control the future through manipulation and fear. Sarah addressed the gathering. But they never understood that real influence comes from love, from giving people the freedom to choose their own paths while supporting them along the way. Michael stood to share his own perspective. I was a street kid who dared to dream of becoming a doctor. My parents showed me that dreams can come true not just through hard work, but through the power of unconditional love. That's the message we share with every child who comes through these doors. Emily, now following in her mother's footsteps with plans for medical school, added her voice. Our family's story taught me that biology is just the beginning. Real family is built through choice, through love, through standing together when the world turns dark. As the evening drew to a close, Thomas looked around at what they had built from the ashes of their own tragedy. The Bennett fortune was long gone, but something far more valuable had taken its place: a legacy of healing, of hope, of families forged through love rather than obligation. Sarah squeezed his hand, both of them watching Michael treat a young street child's scraped knee while Emily read stories to a group of shelter kids. Their own journey had come full circle, transforming personal pain into community healing. "We did it," Sarah whispered. "We turned their scheme for control into a force for good." Thomas pulled her close, remembering the desperate man he'd been before a brave street child saved his life. "No," he corrected gently. "Love did it. Love always finds a way." Around them, the Bennett Community Center hummed with activity, hope, and possibility, a living testament to the truth that family isn't about power or control, but about the choice to love without conditions, to stand together against darkness, and to lift others as you climb. The Crawfords had tried to build an empire. The Bennetts had built something far more powerful, a community bound by love, healing, and the unshakable belief that every life has value, every heart has purpose, and every child deserves a family to call their own. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, sacrifice, and redemption. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We value your perspective and would love to hear how this narrative resonated with you. Support our team by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with friends and family who might find inspiration in the Bennett family story. Your likes and engagement help us continue creating meaningful content that celebrates the power of unconditional love and the true meaning of family. Together, let's spread these messages of hope and healing.